And welcome back as we get into talking about. We have this AI series that we've been doing all summer. And imagine today we'll be talking about how you can functionally create a fully functional app within hours using AI, Cursor AI specifically. And it's gaining speed as a way for low code or non technical users to be able to use it. In addition, if you're a developer, also being able to use prompts in order for you to optimize your code. And Ryan, let's dive into it.
Hey, everybody. Excited to be here to continue kind of the summer of AI with a little bit of a crescendo. We did Claude a couple weeks back, and Claude had a functionality called Claude Artifacts. And that was something that really inspired a lot of our imaginations as we began to ask or prompt related to something that we previously in ChatGPT could have gotten a chunk of code for, and think about how we could go put that on our local machine and ultimately get to launch that in a browser and start to see that code come to life. Well, all of a sudden with Claude, with artifacts, over on the right side of the screen, we were starting to see something that was a live functioning application. And that actually now works on mobile. So this is something where sitting on the subway running to a concert the other night, and my wife brought up an idea, and we all of a sudden had that thing working in a matter of a few minutes. But when we did that Claude episode a few Mondays back, I teased something called Cursor. And I sometimes ask my friends and colleagues, I say, is it just my X algorithm? Is it just my YouTube algorithm that's tuned to just show nothing but cursor all over the place? And some people say, no, I'm actually seeing a lot of it too, and some say, yeah, I think that's your algorithm. So one objective I have with the time that we spend here today is to see if a few more of you end up with an algorithm that's got a little bit more of this out there, because it's something that's seriously inspiring me on a pretty regular basis. And so today we're going to do something that I hope can be pretty interactive and serve as a little bit of a workshop. And it's something that hopefully we can actually have many of you play along with together. Liberty said that in a matter of a couple hours, you can have an app working. I will attempt to prove that in a matter of a couple minutes, we can probably have an app working. Now, we're going to do this in a way that's a little bit more ambitious than what one could, because we've been playing with this for a number of weeks, if not months. And so we're starting to develop some more advanced capabilities. And I'm going to cut over to look at something here on the screen with Cursor. So this is cursor.com. Everybody ought to go there and download this application. This is just an IDE, an integrated development environment. It's actually just a branch of VS Code, or a fork of VS Code. So anybody that's experimented in the last couple of years with writing code probably used VS Code, and this is really just it with a couple extra features. It is produced by a really small team. I think they're based in the Bay Area, and that company is called Anysphere. And they're all active on Twitter, and you can actually kind of see in real time a lot of the conversation that they're having with the community. And so do take a moment to download that, and then also consider, with regard to the Q&A system that we've got, putting in suggestions for things that we might build, or things that you might want to see in the application, in the Cursor application, and in the application that we actually build. We've got a couple different apps here. So earlier this week, I was messaging Nigel and brought up a home theater example, given kind of his area of expertise, and used a tool that I want to look at with everybody that kind of feeds this Cursor bit. So we'll start with that example, but we probably got time for a couple different examples to be worked through. So please do toss those into the system. So I'm going to start right away with the demo, and then as it relates to the broader panel here, in terms of any panelist additions, please, because we're going to be doing a little bit of live interactive stuff that isn't always just like 5 or 7 seconds of wait time. We'll probably have time for folks to jump in and talk over the top of this. So go ahead and raise hands along those lines as well. So I'm going to kick over here, and I'm going to start with a couple things that I want you guys to want you guys to see. So here's V0 by a company called Vercel, and Vercel is making a lot of small tools that are making this a lot easier. So if we wanted to make a cost estimator for home theaters for pros, it'll give me a bill of materials and an hours estimate for installation, and take size of room, speaker count, relative quality, and chair count into consideration. Now, Nigel, I'm not a professional in this space, so if I'm asking this to make things that are a little bit rudimentary, excuse me, or throw in, speak up with any suggestions. But V0 is not too much different from Claude's artifacts feature that we saw a couple weeks ago. So this is writing the code, and then after a few seconds, it's starting to render what it is that it worked through. And this is something that you can use for free without necessarily needing to sign up. And I think it's actually still running, but it's kind of talking through. Okay, it looks like it's done now. So it's kind of giving me an explanation of how this thing actually works. So let's just kind of give it a test. Let's say that the room is 1,000 square feet, has 7 speakers, that we want this thing to be high end, and it's going to have 5 chairs in it. And so now we can see the results and we can see the bill of materials. So it looks like this thing kind of works. And what's cool is that we can hit the publish button. And then we've got a link that's handed to us here. And if we go to a new tab and paste that link in, this is something we could share with other people. So anybody could immediately go use this, and then anybody could also see the code or could hit the fork button and begin to iterate on this themselves. And so now we're going to bring some of what we did here into Cursor, because what is really valuable is having just a little bit of a boilerplate, right? So that is some code to start with, rather than us just starting completely from scratch.
So I see Nigel's hand raised. So I think he might have some immediate feedback right there. Let's bring Nigel in.
So it's amazing to watch that. My first question is, what is the source of the data that it's pulling from? Because it's interesting. I can't remember if you picked medium or high, and then it said the receiver is $1,000, which I would have probably put in low. So I wonder, it's amazing to see, and I guess you can alter that, but what's the source of the data it picked?
So Nigel, what we were actually looking at here is the V0 proprietary model. If we went to ChatGPT and did this, or went into Claude and did this, maybe that would have a LLM that's trained on the general internet and maybe of a greater number of parameters, right? So it might be a little bit more well-informed. If we were going to build this out a little further, and we can do this here on the fly, maybe what we do is go generate some synthetic data with one of those applications, right? Or even pull a price list off of it. We could use a scraper to pull a price list off of a real website like B&H, and then we could feed that to it to give it a little bit more information. What the V0 model is optimized for is actually being trained on Next.js and a couple of these other platform technologies, up-to-date documentation. So this is highly tuned for code and less tuned for world knowledge.
CJ?
And could you point this at a specific source? So if you had either a review publication or an AV magazine, so hey, I want to point this at What Hi-Fi, and I want to use this What Hi-Fi and 2 or 3 other sources as defining the parameters of what is a good quality receiver and speaker system versus what is something more entry level, and then use that to kind of inform. Because I had a similar reaction to Nigel, where I thought, man, I'm going to spend $1,000 on a receiver, but $14,000 in wiring. Again, it's I don't want to get hung up in the semantics of this specific task that we're trying to accomplish, because we can alter the data on the front end, but really it's, can we point can we point the model at a specific source and say, use this as your source of truth for what is low end and high end?
Absolutely. So we started off here in V0 to show like just how quickly you can rapidly prototype an application. Let's take this opportunity to move into Cursor and to start to layer in some of those more advanced concepts. So whether that is tossing in questions or using the chat as a cue for some of those ideas, so we don't lose them as we start to build out here. Let's definitely do that. Liberty, I'll let you take a couple more questions in while we transition over.
Sure, John.
Yeah, Ryan, I have a question. It seems to me a lot of these AI tools, if you think of your skills on a scale from 0, having never known anything at all, and 10 being mastery, there's a lot of tools that get you from 0 to 1, online step-by-step tutorials on how to install an application. And a specific scenario I am dealing with is in the language R, there's a package called Erlang, which is a series of mathematical models to predict queuing theories to see if you have how many people coming into a store, how many people you need at the check stands to get them through in a certain timely manner. There's a lot of tip sheets on how do I get Visual Studio installed, how do I install the R package, and then nothing. And so I went to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT kind of took, if I was at level 1 because I knew how to install the tool, ChatGPT jumped to level 3, and it's like, now that you just type this in there and it'll just go. But there's no tools that I can find that have instructions on how do I get from, okay, I've got the thing installed to actually understand the basics of how this works so that I can use these more advanced tools where it's collaborating with me to actually design the code and build the code. And that's what I'm missing. And I don't know if Cursor can help solve that problem, but it seems like 0 to 1 is great. From 3 to 7 is great. But you're missing the steps from 1 to 2 and anything higher than level 7 on that skill complexity.
I would say on the higher than level 7 element, I tend to agree on a lot of fronts where we're starting to see like people on, I'm just referring to like the YouTube community, right? Or the Twitter communities of these like 10-year plus, experts starting to get more intrigued is this idea that we're really reliant today on general purpose models, right? We keep using GPT-4o or Claude 3.5 as the holy grail that can do all of this. But with V0 here, they took a model, a small model in this case, not one of these 100 billion parameter models, and fine-tuned it with training data sets that were specific to the Next.js and, a couple of these other specific languages. And the latest, it's up to date as of like, a couple days ago's, latest features and functionalities within a particular, language or framework. And so in Cursor, what you're going to see in a minute, John, is that we have the ability to use many models all at one time for different purposes. And so what we would probably end up doing is as we set up some of our initial boilerplate to kind of get the framework of an application established, we're going to use GPT-4o or Claude 3.5. But then if you are starting to iterate on, something specific within the statistical model and the R programming language, there are, if not already, I'm sure coming, some smaller models that are more specifically, geared for advancing what's going on with R. So let's take a look at some of that as we dive in.
And so as Ryan, go ahead.
Go ahead, Liberty.
I was going to say, just as you get that prepared, John, should just make sure, just tracking with you with your question, you're seeking, like, there's this general issue with just tools overall in this AI space that you're finding. And what you're asking is, can Cursor solve this specifically with this development tool to be able to like fix that, find that spot for like the 1 to 2, 2 to 3, and fill that gap there. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think that's generally accurate.
All right, go ahead, Ryan.
Very good. I'll try and get picture-in-picture going here. If that's in the way, let me know, and we'll get that moved out of the way.
Yes.
Right now, I went to Versal.com, and I'll actually I kind of want to do everything completely from scratch here so that everybody can see exactly what we're doing. So Versal.com, I keep getting taken back into my projects, but here, if I go to Versal.com/templates, this gives us a lot of different boilerplates to start from. Now, if anybody's asking, what is Versal? Let's take a look at something else here. I made a little visual around a stack. So you can build your boilerplate application from either angle here. We can either start from Versal or we can start from our local machine and just create a little folder with some code in it and then ultimately push that up to GitHub and up to Versal. But we're going to start on the Versal side. I will bring this visual back up, but it's appreciating that Versal is this, this web-facing server, this web host that an end user is going to be able to access the application that we're building themselves kind of on the internet. And we'll actually post the link here in the chat so that folks can access the application that we're building. It's going to be internet facing. This isn't something that will run only on my local machine. Now, Versal has an alternative called Replit. And so Replit, R-E-P-L-I-T, is something that on YouTube you'll see a lot of tutorials. It'll say Cursor plus Claude 3.5 Sonnet plus Replit, or Cursor plus Claude 3.5 plus Versal. And in both of those cases, what they're saying is, here's how you write code and how you actually get the application deployed. So we're going to step back here into Versal. We're going to find this boilerplate with something called Supabase. And this is a boilerplate set of files, really, that just is going to allow us at some point, if we desire to have back-end functionality, like a database that we can write things to, where that'll persist and have authentication, it'll actually be there. So I'm going to hit deploy. We're going to cross our fingers if this doesn't work the way we want it to work. And we're going to call this the theater app. It's going to create a GitHub private Git repository in my existing account. And then it's going to get this PostgreSQL backend provision for me. So this is free functionality for people that are not using this in any key commercial context. So we've got our GitHub repository created. I'm going to add this backend here with Supabase. And again, we might not use the Supabase backend, but we've at least got it if we get there from an advanced functionality perspective. And then we'll see this application build. Now, as soon as we see the application build complete, what we're going to be able to do, and I'm just going to select the free plan here again. It's based in the US. That all looks good. Give that a name and click create. Okay. I'm going to decide here that we need a production environment and development environment, but say that that's probably enough. We probably don't need a third environment. And now within probably a minute or much less in all likelihood, we're going to see this get deployed to the web. So we're going to actually be able to see this application right away, but it's going to just be boilerplate, kind of blank screen. So while that's coming up, what I want to do is open GitHub on my desktop. And so to do that, we're just going to open GitHub desktop. And here we've got some different repositories, but I want to clone a repository down from my GitHub. So if I just refresh this, I'm hoping that I'll see one here with that theater in it. Okay, so here's the Next.js Supabase theater. I'm going to hit clone. That's going to put that into my local GitHub folder. So this just copied all those files that were just provisioned into this starter pack down to my local machine. Just checking back in here that that's still deploying. And so now we've got that, and I can click open in Cursor from GitHub, and it didn't actually open the folder, but no problem. I'll just navigate to it this way and open that folder. Okay. Now in the background, we just got the confetti because Versal successfully deployed this. So if I go to my dashboard and click this visit button, we're going to be brought to our functioning application that we just created with a click, but it doesn't do any of the things that we would expect it to. It's kind of telling us, here are some things you might do with this application you created. But here's where we actually get to start to do some stuff that's pretty neat. these are all the folders and files that were put into that folder when we did the automatic deployment. But we've got some functionality here, right? Because we just built a home theater estimator tool. And so here we've got the code for that home theater estimator tool. And so I'm going to copy that code, and we are going to start to bring that code into this boilerplate application. And so there's only one other thing that I actually want to do before we get started from a setup perspective is there's this cursor rules file. And cursor rules, I'll show you exactly what that is. I'm going to add that to our boilerplate, is basically this way to add a prompt. So it's a prompt specific to this project. And so I just found this from somebody on the community that said if you put these cursor rules in here, it'll just guide your LLM and cursor to operate a little bit more consistently for you. So I put that in there, and I'm going to hit save. And now we're really going to get started here. So I'm going to hit Command-Shift-I, and I am going to open up a composer window. And this is how we start to interact with this in a way that we're basically going to just talk to it and tell it what we want to do. And so I've got the ability to click at code base, and you guys will learn soon what that's going to do. You can see here we're going to talk to Claude 3.5 Sonnet, and I'm going to say, we want to make an app for home theater installation professionals. I have the code here for an estimator, and I want you to take this boilerplate app we deployed already and add this component to it. So the Shad CN UI is something else that was kind of specified in there already. It just gives it a little bit of guidance on the actual way we end up making this look and feel. So now I'm going to hit paste, right? Control V. That's all the code that was generated by that V0 to build the home theater app. And we're going to hit enter. And when we hit this, it is going to start to do something called a multi-file edit. So it's going to create files if necessary, and it's going to edit files as necessary. And almost certainly in the next minute or two, we're going to run into some errors. But what I hope everybody can appreciate is just how quickly this ought to be able to help us push through any of those errors that we see generated. Now, it's also going to be relatively verbose in telling us what it is kind of accomplishing. And so I'm looking over here on the right, and I can adjust the width here, and so I can see what's going on. So it says to get that in here, it's going to create this new component file. It's going to add the code to that file, and it's going to update the main layout. So it did that. Step 3, ensure it's got everything there. And now it should be on the home page of our Next.js app. So I'm going to hit accept
So Ryan,
all.
if you need
save
anything
all.
to be explained as you're going through this, is that in that bottom box where it says type your instructions for commands? Like where, because I read somewhere that you're also able to for it to walk you through and explain things. Where does that happen?
Yeah, I'd say that's kind of happening right here. And then certainly if you are feeling like this is not sufficiently verbose, I mean, you can say, explain this to me like I'm 5. And I'll, as soon as we check whether this worked initially, I'll go into a couple of those things. So I'm just going to kind of click out of this.
Can you move the screen over a smidge just so it gives us that entire, oh, no, just move it over because your picture-in-picture is blocking whatever, so we can see the full, yeah. There we go.
Okay, move that over to that side. So essentially now what we want to do to just see if that worked is we're going to open the terminal. And, this is some stuff that I picked up that you'll pick up soon enough. So we're using Versal, right? So I said Versal build, and now it's going to just ask me a couple of questions. Do we pull this in? Yes. Should I set it up? Yes. Where do we want it to go? There it is. So I'm pretty much just giving it the default answer for all of these. Like I did not have any specific training on that. I just answered those questions the first time correctly, and since it's never failed me. So So it's actually building the application now, and we so far have not gotten any errors. We did get an error now, and so what we're going to do is we're going to just grab all of this text here and pretty much just grab the whole thing. We're going to open Composer back up again with Command-Shift-I, and we're going to drop that in there, and then we're going to at the code base again. So at code base basically just pushes your whole code base up into the prompt, and you can see again we're using Claude 3.5 Sonnet. So it says it sees that there was an error that was using use state. It shouldn't have done that. We're going to update the code, and so it's writing.
And
some
it's
fixes.
Actually that's what we're seeing happening here. Is it's correcting the errors because
fixing the code in real time.
Yeah, just clarifying, just making sure.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's looking at another file to make sure that thing doesn't require any changes. And now it's saying, go ahead and try and run it again. So I'm going to accept all. I'm going to save all. And one other thing is we use TypeScript. And so we would generally see over here any files in red that it was thinking we're going to kind of end up throwing an error for us. But we'll try Versal build again. Again, I'm not expecting errors because I don't see any files highlighted in red. We've got a couple more here. So let's give this another chance.
Yeah, because as you're doing that, I'm thinking about the way that it has been marketed thus far has been, you can be non-technical and go ahead and use this. Now, looking at the screen for a non-technical person, I don't know how unintimidating that would be because there's still very much that part of it. But watching you use those, like showing us, that's why I specifically asked that, okay, if you put it in here and then ask it, like really the mindset of prompting and refining is what will make something like this really work for someone who has not been traditionally in this space.
I agree. Definitely can feel just a little bit intimidating.
Is it generating this in JavaScript? Is that what it is?
This is React.
React. Okay.
And Next.js, which is kind of just a flavor there. So we're going to give this one more. Going to give this one more shot, and then we've got a functioning application we can definitely fall back to if we get it all stuck here.
So you're watching this live on Office Hours as Ryan is building an application. And Ryan, what we'll probably do as that's moving in the background, we'll get to some of these questions and then we can always come back. So we'll do this tango between Cursor and getting our questions in from the community. Alexander?
Yeah, the first question for the second hour is from Craig McFarlane in Boston, Massachusetts. Lots of AI tools are aimed at individual engineers. Are there team-oriented features or QA/testing-oriented features?
Ryan?
Yeah, so really good question. I think the question is spot on. I mean, with ChatGPT and with Claude, both of them have professional plans, and those plans allow for more of like a multiplayer, right, experience with regard to saving your prompts and collaborating on those prompts. When it comes to Cursor, I think where you end up getting into a team-oriented place is at the code repository level, right? So today, any enterprise, I would say the engineering, the coding is happening on an individual, engineer's machine, but GitHub or what other private Git repository you have is where your code base lives, and so that's where there is this version control and ability to pull a particular branch and check code or check in or check out code in a way that can be collaborative. And then Versal is that that host, and that application definitely allows for a multi-user experience as well. So I would say there are very much team-oriented features on GitHub and Versal, but Cursor itself is something that you're going to tend to be doing a little bit more solo.
Next question.
Next question is from Courtney Gooden, Hollywood, California. Create an application that plays back a broadcast WAV file or MP4 file with a sizable timecode window that shows the running timecode as the file plays.
Ryan?
I like the idea a lot. This speaks to something, Courtney, that I'd be a little bit afraid of without my, prior preparation, is like interacting with MP4 files or local files on the machine. It'd be a really fun one to experiment with. But what did you have to add there, Courtney?
Yeah, I was going to ask, can it handle things like that where you want to, rather than just database or internet-based programming where it's pulling data from the web, does it know enough, for example, to read a broadcast wave file, because that data is stored inside the file in an encoded format, in a binary format. It has to convert it to decimal and display it and put it in a display. I mean, I did something I created, which we looked at the other day, which is basically what I'm asking for, to do playback for music video files. And it just created this movable window with, and I wrote this 20 years ago. Something like this. But in order to do it, I had to learn a lot about how broadcast waves, where the metadata was, how it's stored, how to read it, how to convert it. Does it have the ability to look all that information up to create something like this? Or do you have to guide it step by step to train it or to let it know how to find that information or how to use that information in creating a file?
I think if you go on YouTube, Courtney, and look at coding with cursor examples, a lot of people will do 2 and 3 hour live running sessions. And I think you'll see people accomplish video editing and photo editing application builds, both those that live in the browser and those that live on a local like Mac or Windows deployed environment. So I think I've definitely seen examples along these lines.
Okay, so you can create applications that are freestanding that don't necessarily run in the browser, that can handle local files, read local files, et cetera, without having to go to a cache of internet code somewhere.
Yeah, and the cache of internet code, right? I mean, that we're mostly speaking to this idea that you're using the models to use, Cursor is powered by OpenAI's GPT-4 or Claude 3.5. So it's using those models to inform how it's going to write the code. But you certainly can deploy then the application that you build locally or up in the internet.
Next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Do you need a Cursor account to use Cursor?
I don't know the answer to that. I created a Cursor account because there are some pro features that I thought were useful, and so one of those is related to the Claude 3.5 model. Like you tend to want that better model. But one thing that you can also do is use your own API keys for Claude or for OpenAI. So Cursor can either use its keys and you can reimburse it for its consumption, or you can go provide your own keys.
John?
Yeah, just this morning when I was installing Cursor, it did require me to set up an account in order to actually start running the program, though I was able to install it without the account.
Next question.
John Snyder in Reno, Nevada is asking, what security questions and concerns should a person have in mind when using these tools? Are these tools loaded weapons in the hands of a novice?
Ryan?
It's probably safe assumption. And so, when it comes to the actual deployment into a production context, and we're talking about, authentication for an example, like this is something you'd want an expert to look at before you've got paying users trusting it with, trusting the application that you built with sensitive information. The other consideration is when you're using the LLM, it's often giving me commands to run to go install a library, for example. And this is an area where you really do need to be careful just running terminal commands on your machine to install a library and knowing that library is something that doesn't potentially have malicious actors behind it.
CJ?
I look at this in the same way as, hey, I have an idea, but I'm not a very good artist, right? I can have something like a Midjourney create concept art in a way that matches closely to the vision that's in my head, but that I wouldn't be able to create to give that actual artist a head start on what does the vision actually look like. I think of it in the same way from a coding perspective of, I don't know how to write the code, but I am going to create kind of the skeleton or the, version 1.0 or 0.1, whatever you want to call it, to show to a programmer to say, hey, this is how I'm actually thinking about having this work. This is how I want this to look. This is how I want it to function. And then have them either look at the code and say, oh, I see what they're doing there, but you need to change a couple things to see a big improvement. Or it might just be a way for you to get your concept through to it. So it's really, are you working with a team of programmers, or is this something you're trying to do yourself? I remember having never written a program in Xcode before, around the new year last year, creating a program in Xcode, but it took 12 hours. So what we're able to do, what Ryan's showing now, is so much faster than, and to actually see it in real time, as opposed to having to, hey, here's a code snippet, I'm going to cut this out, I'm going to copy it into Xcode, I'm going to see how it previews. And it was a lot of trial and error that, had it not been January 1st and everybody was just kind of hanging out with the day off, I don't know that I would have been able to have the patience to go through that process. This is something totally different.
John?
Yeah, and the reason I ask is, and maybe I should just be way more concerned about all the code in our lives, because I know this might just be a function of scale rather than a different type of problem, because programmers have always borrowed each other's code. But doing this, I would have no idea what those commands are saying or doing as they're running. And I would just worry, like, does the thing that comes out the end approximate what I think should happen when this happens? And if I was a bad person, I would be doing everything in my power to go in and corrupt whatever I could, because I'm sure there's a lot of people who are just letting these things run on their own and trusting that everything that they're building is just true or accurate. And I have no way of telling that.
That's a fair assumption. Ryan, do you want to jump in?
I think we kind of addressed what we can there. I mean, certainly the installation of packages is the thing that I'd be the most careful with.
Copy that. Chris?
Yeah, I took Courtney's example and I pasted it into Cursor, and let's see if we can do this with Python, because that's a programming language I'm familiar with. And when I ran it, it's like, okay, well, you need this. You need this package, you need this package, and the two of the packages it mentioned I'm familiar with, so I was fine installing them. But that's a thing where, like, you don't know, and if someone who isn't familiar with this kind of stuff goes down this road, you could easily install something nefarious or bork your system up, because it's like, oh, well, it says I need to run this command line code, and if you don't know what that command line code does, then you could be in trouble.
In other words, can you trust it? In other words,
well, yeah, that's a huge thing. Can you trust it? And like, maybe, and that seems to be with all of this AI stuff. It's all like, it seems like everyone uses it in a way that's like, okay, this gives us an idea, this gives us a start, this gets us in the neighborhood, and then we use our expertise to fine tune it. Well, what we're kind of talking about here is like, well, what if you don't have the expertise to fine tune it? And that could be problematic.
John?
Yeah, and to be clear, I 100% just copy and paste command line codes into my command line interface all the time. And like, I know I'm running a risk there, so maybe that's the approach you should have, is like, know what kind of risk you're running.
And it's fair. It's definitely something fair for us to bring up, especially as this platform is sharing this information. So we want to ensure that you know that there is a risk when you are using any of these tools. CJ?
It's also what level of access and what level of damage can the machine that you're running on this do? It almost merits having a kind of a sandbox to play in with these coding tools that if something did go awry, that machine's not going to do much damage. It doesn't have your private information on it. It's not going to be the victim of something, of a malware attack or something nefarious. But you do want to be able to say, okay, the novices are the people who can really benefit from something like this. I think about like high school students who are just starting to learn about what's possible, and being able to converse with something that can give you real-time results, and you can, it's like Swift playgrounds. Like I can put code into this and see it in real time what's happening. The unlocking of the mind that is like, okay, I can poke this thing and something's going to come out the other side. Oh, well, what if I did this and what if I did that? And the ability to have that interactive element that these AI tools allow you to do, really, like, I think about how much I learned, and I don't have a mushy, spongy brain that can, start to end in the time to beat on this stuff. I think it's really exciting, but you do want to like have these tools give something for like, hey, if you're brand new to this, here are your safety. This is common sense safety 101 stuff that you should consider if you're going to start messing around with this. If you don't know what you're doing, you've never done it before, what kind of computer are you running it on? Don't paste code into something that's going to allow you to do damage. But we'll get there.
And coming in from Ukana, we've got Craig Craig says, security isn't binary. Does it leak private information? Does it have a weakness that could be used to insert bad links or run malicious code? Just some of the things that we want to continue to think about. Next question.
Next question is from Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas. Comment on this top 10 list of coding tools. Cursor is on this list.
All right, let's take a look at this list. Not sure if you got a chance to see that yet, Ryan, but on this,
I'm looking at it right now.
Yep.
So Replit is something here that definitely is an alternative to Versal that we're looking at. So that's one that I'm really familiar with. And then GitHub Copilot is an alternative to Cursor. So those two we've got kind of an obvious opinion on. And I think if you go online and research GitHub Copilot versus Cursor, you'll just see a massive disparity in the adoption rate. Or Cursor, you get a lot greater adoption. Otherwise, we'd be doing this on GitHub Copilot today. Amazon Code Whisperer, I did just read about a pretty significant kind of like number of hundreds of millions of dollars of savings that they've got related to some refactoring. So it sounds like they're making progress there. But then we also saw that Alexa's using, one of the Anthropic models. So they're not always eating their own dog food with that application.
Next question. Oh, sorry, Ryan.
Nope, that's it.
I just had a note in there. Am I crazy? Whenever I see a link like that, I always look at what it is. And that link was the droidsonroids.com. And that's a big part of, am I going to click on this or not? Is there any way before you actually log into that to do a lookup to say, is this link, what's the level of safety of clicking on this? Is there any kind of system for that?
Google has SafeSite, that will automatically, it's a plugin that will check each URL before it goes to it to let you know if it's on its blacklist.
Okay. Well, but that's just a checking against a list that's arbitrary, but Google probably understands that pretty well.
And then it can also be helpful to putting it into something like Google and then seeing how many other search related, because then you would see, they've got a lot of content out there, and that can help you and make.
I've just trained myself pretty religiously in discussions. Particularly, I always look at where the URL is taking me and what's the option. I mean, do I know anything about that source, or is it just something that somebody put up on their website for this discussion, and the people could be idiots as easily as they could be geniuses.
Copy that, Alexander.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This is Paul Wallace in Austin, Texas, again, asking, comment on GitHub Copilot, which is a code completion tool born from a collaboration between GitHub, OpenAI, and Microsoft, compared to Cursor?
Ryan?
I think the functionality promised is very similar, and the difference between Cursor and GitHub Copilot are really just in adoption and in ease of use. Something that would be interesting for us to look at as a group here is something called preempt. So if you can find that session where one of the Cursor founders was out there demoing the product, the gentleman that was interviewing him asked how Cursor actually takes the prompt and formats it and pushes it out to get it to now automatically go write all of this code, right? And preempt is open source, and it's something that's out there on GitHub for anybody to look at. And so I think preempt appears to be the secret sauce that Cursor has, and is part of the reason they just raised $60 or $70 million in venture capital. But it must not be the only secret sauce, because they've open sourced it. One other thing that's worth looking at is that because of that preempt framework, Cursor can use the OpenAI models, or it can use the Anthropic models, or many other models that you can actually plumb into it. And so I wonder if that GitHub Copilot functionality is a little bit more tied to OpenAI's models because it's a Microsoft product.
John?
Yeah, I think I'm not familiar, and Ryan, maybe you can answer this question as to whether or not the Copilot stuff can do the querying your code. But just what I've seen so far in Cursor is I selected a group of my Erlang code I was telling you about earlier today, where I understand the math behind it, but I didn't understand how to read the abbreviations in the code at all. And I just said, explain to me what this is. And it broke down all the different variables and the different formulas in a way that I can really understand just reading it in English, which is a super great feature to me. So I don't know whether or not Copilot has the ability to ask about the code, or if it's just autocomplete. I think like the Amazon tool is more of just an autocomplete. Ryan, do you know if it can do any of that? Tell me what this means stuff.
Absolutely. I mean, last night I was working with my wife on a small project here, and we were using Supabase. We had that kind of configured, but then we also had this temporary local data store, just like a JSON file. And we needed it to kind of stub out, where am I going to replace the commands that are looking at the local file with the actual Supabase like cloud APIs. And so we just purely told it, go comment that code and tell us where we're going to replace this stuff later on. But I do also often just say, please add comments so that this code is something I can understand better.
CJ?
It's also a little, some of this conversation is a little ephemeral because of how quickly everything is changing. I mean, a new LLM gets released that has a different level of context, a different level of training, and then our whole ability to interface changes. And I would just point to, while not a code completion tool in terms of writing a program, I use an AI SQL query writing assistant because I have a database that has, a dozen different tables in it, and I'm trying to write complex SQL queries. And I don't do that for a living. I've just started learning that in the last 3 or 4 years. And so I ask it things in plain English, and I will toggle which model. I use Table Plus. I'll toggle which model it's going to call on. Are you calling on GPT 3.5, GPT 4, Turbo, Mini, all the different contexts? And even just within one company's offering, I see very different results. And how often does it error correct me, and how often does it suggest a change? So I think there is a secret sauce that's going to happen on the prompt engineering side, but not from the user's perspective, but from the company's perspective, who is making that middle software in between the user and the model. Right? I am writing a query to Table Plus. Hey, I need you to select these 3 attributes from the inventory table when these 2 conditions are true. But the query that goes out to ChatGPT is, here are all of the fields in that table. Here are all the fields in the related table. Here's the domain of the data to show you the min and the max. It actually goes and crafts a rather long prompt, and sometimes it even exceeds whatever the limit is for the submission, and I have to, kind of reel myself in a little bit. But I know that I didn't create that prompt. I didn't create something that was that verbose. So it's almost like it's going through a middle layer of AI prompt tweaking before it goes up out to the back end. And that combination of what is the company in the middle doing versus what does the model that's above everything, how does that advance? That's where we're going to see a lot of this stuff change pretty frequently.
Ryan?
I wanted to pull back up the actual demonstration rig here and look at the kind of the post-error bit. So here it is, the local application. And so you can see this looks different, right, than it did when we were over here in V0. And so right now we've got this kind of, custom functionality to calculate based on, room size, speaker count, quality, chair count. So calculate the estimate. And then we
These
get
are some massive home theaters. I mean,
shows up below. And so what I want to do is just show you guys how we kind of iterate one step further on that. And so, so this was the actual functionality on one piece of that application, and that was the cost estimator. But then we had the one that was actually doing layout, and so that's this one. So Nigel and I were looking at this, on a prior date, and so we've got code here as well. So if we move this code in, what we can do is tell Cursor that we want a menu on the left and to have our layout thing and our cost estimator thing. And so we're going to go back to Cursor here, and we're going to open up that command line again, and we're going to say we have more code for a new area of the app. We want this. We want a menu bar that will let me switch between this layout component and the estimator component we had elsewhere. I'm going to add the code base there, and we're just going to let that thing run for a minute. Now, while that's running, one other thing that I wanted to show is you can actually hit Command-Shift-P here, and you can type in simple browser. And what that's actually going to do, if we take the link here and paste that in, is it's actually going to load it right here. So inside the app, we don't even necessarily need to use a separate browser, and we can actually even split screen that if we want. So we could be looking at code in one part and and a little sample of the application in another. Now, this has all been working behind the scenes. And so we gave it that new code, and it said, okay, to integrate that new component, I'm going to actually create that sidebar, and then I'm going to create the new component. And so we're going to accept all those changes. And we're going to save all. We're going to see if that worked. And so to do that, we can simply hit refresh here and check on that. And I'm thinking that when I hit accept all, that what we want to do is kind of restart this thing and see if that worked.
Yeah, can I add a thought, Ryan?
Please.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting to me here is that, if I looked at this as a commercial end use, there would be 25,000 things wrong with this. If I look at this as an MVP of an idea that we might want to build on, which I probably would have paid someone tens of thousands of dollars to do a few years ago, it strikes me this provides an amazing shortcut into something that will allow us to demonstrate a concept to iterate around and improve on. And actually, if you think about it in the sprint world and not in the waterfall world, this is a great MVP to start a conversation. And what you've managed to do in a few minutes, would have cost hours and weeks and months and thousands of dollars.
Mm-hmm. It's pre-visualization for previs for programs.
Proof of concept is definitely what this is, as opposed to to something that people are often using to generate production code. But I think it's also worth commenting there on just the rate of progress, right? I mean, we've got something here that just a couple weeks ago we were looking at Claude at something that was just a lot more simple and straightforward. And today, between V0 and Cursor, we were able to to generate a couple components. And we didn't really look at how this one actually works with the whole layout, but right, I mean, here we can add a speaker, and we just told this thing in really simple terms, add a speaker, add a chair, and then let me do things like move that chair left or move that chair right. And being able to put that in Versal in a way that's now web deployed is just something that I hope everybody gets an opportunity like I have to to play with a little bit further.
Next question.
Next question is from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. How would you deploy Cursor build code to interface APIs or other dynamic code bases?
Ryan?
So this is something my wife did accomplish. We were building a party for, we were planning a party, a going away party, and we wanted the RSVP functionality to populate a Google Sheet and email us. And so we did a little bit of research on the Google Sheets API. I was joking with Craig about that. And we stood that Google Sheet up, stood that API up, and we're interacting with it. And then last night was when Supabase came into the fold. And so, same thing there. Supabase is that PostgreSQL. It's cloud hosted. It's got API endpoints that somebody can post to and or read from. And I think you'll find that those the Claude model can very effectively work with you to build application functionality that'll read or write with an actual backend or with an external API.
Such a phenomenal hour, Ryan, as we get ready to wrap and enjoy the rest of our day. Any parting words as we have gone through a great, and thank you so much for just walking us through. I'm pretty sure Cursor's got a couple of downloads from all those watching office hours.
I don't have any parting words other than kind of the summer of AI kind of topic list is something that we're getting obviously increasingly deep dived and nuanced into. I saw that the Claude artifacts concept was something that got tossed into the second hours again. So we might have a way to revisit that or V0 specifically. So just keep coming the feedback on what we can do to be helpful when it comes to the AI topics.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much to all of our producers for joining us, for submitting your questions and voting them up and down, because this show is driven by you. To all of our panelists, thank you for your insights, your questions, and your feedback. And of course, to our back-end production team, for without which this show would not be possible. Thank you, thank you, thank you. As we look at the Taluk Traversal, we have traveled 43,000 miles. That's 70,000 kilometers. That's 343 million bananas for scale. Thank you so much. And if you're looking to see what else is happening this week, head over to officehours.global, and we will see you next time. Bye.
Ryan, thank you so much. This was a fascinating hour.
Yeah, this was awesome, Ryan.
I know you did a lot of work to get ready for it, so thank you.
There's a challenge for you. Have Cursor design a little odometer at the bottom that shows bananas traveled throughout the day.
I was literally thinking about that, Courtney, and I was like, I'm not going to say it. I'm not going to say it.
Somebody go register bananaometer really quick.
Translates that into real time.
I have so many things that I was supposed to work on today, and now all I can think about is I want to
all the things
hang
you can
out with
build.
Cursor. I want to build stuff. I have all these ideas, but no ability to execute them before this hour.
Oh, you know what? I really wanted to hear from some of the developers too, because they're both sides of this. It's like, how's Cursor? Also, how do developers that are like senior developers, how do they feel about it? But we'll have to just do another hour on that, right, Ryan?
Yeah, everybody just look at McKay Wrigley on Twitter. He's pretty seasoned and interacts with a number of other people that are pretty seasoned. And I would say these last couple of weeks, they've gone from feeling like this was for beginners and they were skeptics to feeling like this is the real deal. So check those guys